Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Under the Influence. And tonight we'll be watching a video, Are Psychedelics Dangerous? This is a video from a doctor at Johns Hopkins University who has done a lot of research on psychedelics. And he's just going to, explain what are the dangers of psychedelics and how you can minimize the risks of having a bad trip. Now, myself, I have done psychedelics for the last 10 years. So I've had a few bad trips, but they weren't about the environment that I was in. It was just basically the mind state I was in and the things that I was going through and not dealing with. And what psychedelics does sometimes is to make you deal with the things that you aren't dealing with. So hopefully this video is informative. If you've ever thought about trying psychedelics, maybe this video will ease your fears. And maybe one day, for whatever reasons you are wanting to try it, you won't have as much fear. So let's check it out.
So some critique over the use of psychedelics as medical treatments is that they're particularly dangerous. Now, I want to be clear. Every medical intervention and every psychoactive compound has risks. The key question is, what are those risks and what can we do to minimize those risks? In the big picture, the harms you see from psychedelics, even though they're real, and we know what they are, the prevalence of these dangers pale in comparison to other psychoactive substances, both illegal and legal substances. So numerous scientific investigations have had experts rank order the harms to the user and the harms to society in general.
Whoa, what was that? Okay, so it says the most harmful drug is alcohol, then heroin, crack cocaine, methamphetamine, cocaine, tobacco, cannabis. Holy, so LSD and mushrooms are at the lowest. They are at the bottom of the range of what would cause the most harm to you. So, never knew that. I didn't know it was that low on the list.
General, across a wide variety of compounds, legal and illegal. And what's happened time and time again when people bring objective data to these questions is you see at the top of the list, it really bears little relationship at all to legal status. So at the top of the dangers list, you'll get compounds like tobacco and alcohol. Consistently at the far other end of that continuum are psilocybin mushrooms, ranked as the lowest amongst all of the major psychoactive compounds in terms of harm to self and harm to others. And LSD is in a very similar position. Relative to other psychoactive substances, psychedelics are really freakishly physically safe. For most people, there's no known lethal overdose amount for psilocybin or for LSD. The ways that you take too much of a drug and they do you in, none of that stuff happens. One of the amazing things about the classic psychedelics, like psilocybin and LSD, is that they're not addictive. They can be abused, meaning they can be used in a dangerous way to the person, but they're not addictive. No one's jonesing for their next shroom fix.
That's true.
So we know a lot about these risks of psychedelics, and one of the major factors that we know that separates riskier use from less risky use is the presence of a sober guide. The more it looks like the clinical research where the person is not alone, they're with someone they trust, there is control over the dose. And it's going to be in a safe environment where they're not worried about making sure no one assaults them or steals their wallet. The less likely that they're going to run into pitfalls.
And that's the key. Make sure you have the right people. I say this a million times. The right people around you. Be in a good environment where you feel safe and secure. Be careful of how much your dosage is. Don't take too much. Hopefully you have somebody who is knowledgeable on what they think that you should be able to handle safely.
There were a lot of overstatements and urban legends about the dangers of psychedelics. Things like, that it was common for teenagers to stare into the sun and burn their eyes blind because they were on LSD. There's no credible evidence that ever happened. Also, certainly the bad trip is a real phenomenon. It's relatively rare, but sometimes people have accidents and sometimes people die when they're having a bad trip and they panic and they fall from a height or they wander into traffic. These things have happened. However, if the person is in a safe environment, the drug will wear off and they'll be fine. I'm not encouraging it, but there are a lot of overstatements. And so I think psychedelics big picture can help us move towards a world where we start to understand what it takes for the human being to be mentally healthy. What can we do in the spirit of prevention? It holds a lot of promise in helping us figure out what the nature of mental disorders are and also how to prevent those disorders. That's not to say that there aren't dangers. There are very real dangers with psychedelics, but we know what they are, and in the grand scheme of things, they're just far less prevalent than the harms we see from some of these other compounds out there.
So that was a very interesting video. I thought it was interesting. I didn't know, well, for sure, I knew it was not a dangerous drug because I've taken it for years and I've never put myself in any danger by doing it. But I didn't know it was one of the lowest. It is one of the lowest harmful drugs to you, LSD and mushrooms. So that was very interesting to know. So what I tell people about psychedelics is, from my experience, when you take LSD, you're like in the driver's seat. You have a lot of control. Well, majority of, depending on how much you take, you have a lot of control of what's going on, and you're pretty self-aware of what's happening. Mushrooms is like being in the passenger seat. Like, you have no control of what's gonna happen. Most of the time, it'll be a good thing. Some of the times, it may not be what they call a bad trip. And to me, that's just things where you have to deal with. That's about yourself. It's not really, well, it could be the bad people that you're around too. Like, bad trips can happen in different forms. Wrong place, wrong people. And maybe you are really going through some tough shit and mushrooms just kind of brings it to the surface and you can't handle it. To me, those are what bad trips are. Hopefully you found it a little bit informative. Like I said to everybody, do your own research. Know for yourself. Just don't take my opinion or a video's opinion on what is fact. And we'll see you next time. Under the Influence. Take care.